to the House of Lords, and of course is your party president. Thank you, Sal.
Thank you very much, and it really is great to see so many friends from over the last, I was just trying to work out when I moved to Cambridge, it was in 1981, and my first introduction to the Liberals in Cambridge in 1981 was Andrew Duff coming and knocking on my student room door within 3 weeks of the beginning of term to say, I see you're a member of the party in London, would you be prepared to deliver Churchill College for us? And actually, the other story I tell about Andrew, which those of you who know Andrew well may find slightly surprising, but I know Andrew and it is typical of the man. He tried to persuade me to stand for council, and I said to him back in 1983, no, I'm about to have a baby and I want to wait. And he asked me periodically after that, and after I'd had Joe, our third child, I said, well, when Joe starts school, I'll consider it. 2 weeks after Joe started at Mayfield Primary School, he was on the door, and the following May, I joined Morris on the County Council with other people who I can see here, including Tony Morris, Margaret Hunter, and I'm sorry I'm going to miss other people out, but you know who you are. Now, why I mention that is because we were in coalition. We were in coalition with Labour, and one of the interesting things about being a member of our parliamentary party in the Lords, and also sitting in now with the Commons group, is actually there are very few of us who have had experience of working in coalition. And I mean true coalition, not quite the arrangements that Cambridgeshire County Council has at the moment, which I am very careful not to call a coalition. And it has been significant in trying to explain the art of compromise, which Morris and Peter Lee, who I'm sure many of you also remember, managed particularly well. So that whilst many pundits were saying immediately after the 2010 coalition was announced, it'll last 6 months, there'll be another general election, and others said, well, it might just get to 2 years. I knew that the basis of the coalition agreement with a clear plan about what we could do, and obviously there's been some things that have happened unexpectedly, was strong enough for us to be able to work together in exactly the same way that we had to on Cambridgeshire. Did the Cambridgeshire coalition mean that we were best buddies with Labour? No, absolutely not. But we were prepared to work together for the people of Cambridgeshire. And I think that's the really important thing about the last 5 years of coalition. We inherited a mess. The Liam Byrne note to Danny Alexander, or to David Laws and then Danny Alexander saying, sorry, there's no money left, may have been a joke, but the situation more broadly was not a joke. And we are still recovering from austerity, even though there is growth now in our economy. And I know that South Cambridgeshire, not just the constituency, but South Cambridgeshire more broadly, has fared better than many other areas. Actually, the real issue for us is the size of the deficit. And we've still got to be extremely careful as we move into the next government. And that's why when we look at what both the other two main parties are offering, the Liberal Democrats have a very serious role. Of course we have a role should there be a balanced parliament after the election and should there be coalition negotiations. But we have another key role now, which is to make clear that if the Conservatives win an overall majority, they talk about a strong economy, but we know that their strong economy is going to be at an amazing cost of cuts. I mean, they've already said, it's been leaked, that they will have major cuts to the schools budget. Now, they've muttered about keeping it at a standstill since that note was leaked. But believe me, they're also proposing cuts in the NHS. The only way that they can get to an absolute zero deficit within the next 3 years is by further savage cuts. And one of the things that we have done repeatedly in government was to stop them doing it this time round. Now, we may be unhappy with some of the welfare changes. If the Tories had been in on their own, they would have been catastrophic for the most vulnerable people in our society. The other party, Labour, who constantly talk about the important role, that they have in providing. It's interesting, they're both using our phrases. They're now talking about a fair society. But they can't fund it. They won't say. I mean, I've now sat on platforms with Liam Byrne and 2 or 3 other big shadow ministers, and they just say, it'll be in the manifesto. Don't worry, we're going to sort it out. And the big one for me in the last 2 weeks has been their announcement about university fees, which would give our universities across the country, and the 2 here in Cambridge, the most savage cuts of 1/3 of the teaching budgets that currently our universities get. Now, given that many universities are saying that 9,000 is not enough, I'm sorry, a Labour government that says that it would reduce them to £6,000 and they'll find the money from somewhere, it's probably from the mansion tax, their mansion tax, which they've already spent 3 times to my knowledge. But they're dangerous because they will say anything to be elected, anything, including a Barbie bus going round talking to women about the things that they think women want to hear about. Well, we've been doing some polling, and I've actually got a scholar doing some work for me on what the interests are that women have in the run-up to politics. And you're going to be really shocked to hear this, fellow women. Do you know what? We're worried about the economy. We're worried about jobs. We're worried about the health service, and we're worried about education. And yes, we are concerned about childcare, and it's right that we are. But to assume, as Labour do, that you could only talk to women about women's things is typical of Labour. Their campaigns are not particularly honest either. But the good thing about our success in 2010, and actually, I'm going to say this, the good thing about the rise in UKIP and the Green Party, even though I'm determined that round here neither of them are going to be particularly large, is that most people know now that they don't have to vote red or blue. I didn't win in Watford because the last weekend there was a letter from David Cameron that said, vote Lib Dem, you get Gordon Brown. We saw the votes drift away from us. They can't use that argument now. Labour will do similar things because for them it's in their interest to have a 2-party system. And I'm not talking to the Liberal Democrats in the room, I hope you all are, but outside people are finally beginning to realise it isn't just about the Conservatives and Labour, and about time too. And the one thing we have to do is to show, first of all, coalition can work, and it has worked. We are really beginning to bring the country out of severe recession. The economy is growing and it's strong. And yes, of course, there have been problems. It's a journey and we're not yet finished. But the things that we have achieved as Liberal Democrats in government, we have to tell people about. We have to show them that the pupil premium, this extra money for children from low finance backgrounds, is already beginning to pay dividends. My son's girlfriend is a trainee teacher in a secondary school in a very deprived area in the Midlands. She says after 1.5 terms teacher training that she can see the difference between the year 9-10 students who didn't have pupil premium and the year 7-8 ones who did. They're streets ahead of where the 9-10 students are now. And that's because that really focused individual support to increase those young children's aspiration and attainment level is working. And it's interesting that neither of the other parties are talking about getting rid of it. That's a Lib Dem policy, and it's ours, and we have to claim it. David Cameron said just before the election that we wouldn't be able to increase the personal tax allowance. It just wouldn't work. It's now on the front of every Tory leaflet across the country. We need to remind people what he said. And we're determined to increase it even more. We want to get it to £12,500 or thereabouts, because that is the living wage level. That's where it should be. We said that the pension system needed to be reformed. Well, it's a slow process, but it's there and it's going to happen. And we also said we need to take action on climate change. And although the Tories have sort of hidden, which has been quite helpful, We have made some major improvements in the infrastructure. Now, well over 16% of your energy supplies are coming from renewables. That's well over double where it was before 5 years ago, and there's plenty more in the pipeline. We've got the Green Investment Bank so that we can really encourage businesses in green energy sectors to get support. And unlike Labour, who want to just stop and hold energy prices, we've got a Secretary of State, Ed Davey, who says, if they're not being competitive, we will break the big six up. That's what needs to happen, because freezing the prices is not going to help people, because believe me, the big companies will find a way round it. So the big picture is very positive. Don't believe what you see in the polls about a wipeout. Now, I have been an agent in a Liberal wipeout. In 1977, I was the agent in Paddington when we stood a paper candidate, and we got 3% and we were in 4th place behind the National Front. That's wipeout. We had no Liberal GLC councillors that time at all. Interestingly, where our strongest votes were, we have MPs now. Sutton, Richmond, Hornsey, all those places where we have made significant inroads since. And that's one of the other key things about Cambridge, South East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire. We have a strong tradition of local government, and in Cambridge's case, we've run the council. And on Cambridgeshire, we've been in coalition and now the new agreement. We have that solid base from which we can build. I mentioned earlier the problem of losing Watford. Well, I lost once by 1,400 and once by 1,100. And I have had so many people come up to me afterwards saying, if I'd known it was that close, I would have come and helped. And I do not want to hear on the 8th of May anyone saying that to Julian, please. Anyone. The importance of Cambridge for Cambridgeshire with a Liberal Democrat MP cannot be understated. I'm looking at David over there, the people who have a real cephalogist interest in what the party's done. We know we can grow other MPs from neighbouring seats. We have to hold on to Cambridge in order to be able to win South East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire. And I have no doubt that you'll be doing your best for your local campaigns, and that's absolutely right and proper. And I have no doubt that you've got good candidates in both Jonathan and Sebastian. But please do what I did with a number of people up here on this panel, was to help get Bob Russell in 97, to help get Norman Lamb in North Norfolk, because with those two, we were then able to get David Howarth and subsequently Julian in Cambridge. You think you're working hard now. This election is going to be like no other election we have ever fought. So please, help in whatever way you can. We'd love to see you canvassing on doorsteps, but telephone canvassing is equally valuable. We know from the polls we're doing now, where we've done a poll with a 3-month gap in some of our held seats, that if you look at the amount of literature that's gone out between those polls, in some seats, before Christmas and just after Christmas, our share of the vote has gone up 10% in a poll. So delivering those leaflets, when you're sick of the messages because you know them back to front, that extra leaflet is going to be reminding somebody of the achievements we've made and why we need Julian back in Parliament. He's a fantastic MP. I mean, I'm delighted to work alongside him. The fact that I signed him up to the party is neither here nor there, and that he was my deputy on the county council. But he's also important locally too, and not just for Cambridge City. If you think about some of the major achievements he's had, I was saying at the Cambridge HQ this afternoon, I can remember canvassing for 10 years on fair school funding for Cambridgeshire. And here in the city, we had some real experts on it. And I can remember one election where you'd knock on the door and say, what's the most important thing to you and your family? And the answer would be, area cost adjustment. Our children need more money for their schools. Only in Cambridge would you get that sort of response. Well, Julian won it. And he won it by persuading David Laws and other ministers that Cambridgeshire was being treated unfairly. previous MPs from mainly Tory from around the county said they supported the campaign. They did nothing. Julian did. He's also got extra funding for our NHS here in Cambridgeshire. And the Greater Cambridge City deal also builds on work that's been done over the last 20 years. And that's the bit that's really important for all of you, wherever you are, because the Greater Cambridge Partnership recognised 20 years ago now, it wasn't called that then, that actually we have an amazing engine of growth here. The House of Lords published a report earlier this week on Digital Britain, Digital UK. And they're clearly trying to sell some of the newer areas. But if you turn to the page about Cambridge, the statistics are absolutely astounding, including access to finance, including the number of science parks we have, which is well over 20 now. Julian will probably know the exact number. The amount of new jobs that are created, high-level jobs. We know that high-level jobs act as a driver for the rest of the economy. I'm afraid it does also provide a heated housing economy as well, so that's not particularly helpful sometimes. But the key thing is that Cambridge and Cambridgeshire are absolutely key to the future of this country. And why wouldn't you want a champion like Julian making sure that Cambridge gets more and helps the whole of Cambridgeshire and the whole of the country to hold its own in the global technology world? So just to conclude, I'm sorry you're going to get really sore feet over the next few months. I mean, I had that advantage. I may need a new pair of tyres before the end of the campaign. But it's in a really good cause, a practical cause of getting our good councillors re-elected and hopefully some more. Making sure that both Sebastian and Jonathan do well, because their chances of election, if they don't make it quite this time, they could make it in 2020. We've got to have that solid base. But the absolute key for me, and I make no bones about it, is that we have to get Julian re-elected. I want to see the polls that I see show that Cambridge increases those percentage points. He's doing very well, but this is the one election we cannot tell from 1 week to another what's going to happen. One thing we know as Lib Dems, the more we deliver, the more canvas data we get, the easier it will be to find our vote, to get them out on polling day, to support Julian and to support the Lib Dems and to show the country that we can and have governed well. Thank you.